Thank you so much for coming to my first episode in English. I was just saying it in Spanish. Colmillo Chilango. You're my actual first English-speaking guest in the show, so I'm very excited.
Colmillo Chilango.
Before we started rolling the camera, he was asking me what Colmillo Chilango means. And you were in a movie called Wyatt Fang, right? That was one of your first big...
It was called The Wild, but similar, yeah,
Okay.
similar stories.
And I was thinking about that because it's the same author, Jack London, who wrote Call of the Wild and White Fang. So when I lived with, and that's why I was putting those together. So when I lived in Milwaukee, I had a bunch of friends from Mexico City, and they decided to call me what I was very conscious about during that time, which is my fang. They called me Colmillo. They call me Colmillo Blanco, which means white fang.
I see. Okay.
But then they said, you know what? Your fang is actually not white, it's yellow. So we're just going to call you Colmillo because your teeth aren't white. So then he became just Colmillo. And then Chilango is something that I also used to be called, which is someone from Mexico City. So I just went with Colmillo Chilango. So that's where it came from. Yeah, thank you. So now, I wanted to, first off, I've always called you Joshua, or I've never known how to pronounce your name. Is it Nazaroff?
Yeah, Nazaroff.
Nazaroff.
Yeah. I mean, so that's how in English you would say it, or in America. If you're like trying to do the Russian version of it, it'd be Nazarov.
Nazaroff, okay.
But I mean, I've always gone by Nazaroff.
Nazaroff. That's a pretty pretty badass last name, right?
Thank you. Yeah, people seem to think so.
I think it's pretty badass. Now, I'm going to go back to where we first met, which was an acting studio called The Imagine Life, right?
Yeah.
How did you find that place? Or for how long? Yeah.
How did I find that place? I think I might have just driven by it, to be honest. Like, it might have been one of those things where I drove by and I was like, The Imagine Life, huh? And I might have just looked it up online. And I asked around, but I don't remember, because I don't think I had a reference to go there. I think I just must have seen it driving through Los Angeles, looked it up, was looking up how to like start, like I was like, oh cool, an acting class, that sounds great. Sounded like it was right up my alley. I was kind of looking for a new acting class. And so I went to the workshop that they do, the like free, or I don't know if it's free, you have to do like the preliminary thing to see if you're a right fit. And I felt really great about it. And I don't know, when you did that, did she do the pratfall? Did she pretend to fall down?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh, okay.
So what happened?
Diana, at least in our like introductory thing, we're all like in the theater in the seats, and she's like, I'm gonna just go grab something real quick, and she turns the corner, and as she turns the corner, she like, her foot hits like the corner of the stair, and she goes down, and you just think like, oh, that's the end. That's the end of this whole thing. Like she's gonna be hurt. We're gonna have to go home, and she was just faking us all out. Yeah.
For what? Just like to see your reaction?
I think it was to like have empathy, to notice your own empathy, and also to like sort of I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Was like what your feeling was in that moment.
What did you do? Do you remember?
I mean, I was like, no, I was a couple rows up. So I was like, I mean, I wanted to go up, like go and help her, but I was kind of like stuck where I was. So I was just sort of like stunned and had to wait and see.
No, I don't think I went through that.
What, run and help?
The falling part? Like I never saw it, yeah.
No, maybe she, I don't know. I thought she did that like as a regular thing, but maybe she just was playing it up that time.
Yeah, maybe she just like beat the dust and she's like, it's an exercise.
Yeah.
So, now that we're talking about the Imagine Life, and the reason that I asked you this is because for those of you who don't know, Joshua is an actor, and that's how we met. I moved to Los Angeles in 2016, and we've been in touch ever since.
Yeah.
But I remember the class, I really liked it, and it felt right. But I also had no idea about anything really, acting-wise. I did the whole improv scene in Chicago for about a year. That was fun. That was really fun. But I've never really taken an actual serious class before. I have no idea how I found out about it. maybe someone referred me to that place. I think someone from Wisconsin that was living in LA and was taking an acting class there. And I think I went to check it out, and it just felt right, But I didn't stay for too long. But I also remember one time there was this guy, and this is kind of like a little bit off subject, but there's this guy, long hair, skater looking, surfer, kind of like model looking. He didn't really remember his lines too much. I don't know if we were how this was, but he had this kind of like attitude, like I'm too cool kind of thing. Like I don't go through lines. And everyone was like, okay. And then it turns out that like he just booked like a big show and then he was out. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think that something that actors I've noticed who have success, whatever success is for people, or that are working, or they kind of have this trait that they carry themselves with like confidence. They're like, whether they're the best actors or not. And it's something that I think it's a little necessary in this industry, because we want to see someone who brings solutions instead of problems. And I don't know if he brought that, but anyways, that's something that it really stuck to my head when I was there. And another time that I remember that I want to talk about is when we went to this bar. It was like an Irish bar, and the lights went out.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah. When they lost power, we had a romantic little candlelit drink after class. That was nice. That was like, I feel like when you came into the class, I immediately sort of was like, you could maybe tell that you were a bit raw, but there was a lot of good, even though you were raw, there was like you had a lot of like natural talent. You were very like vulnerable. And I really appreciated that about you. You were just kind of like very honest and didn't like push. And a lot of, I think, new actors end up trying to push or do too much. And you were very comfortable sort of just allowing the vulnerability and like trusting yourself and your instincts. And in that way, I think that's confidence on stage. Like that really shines, in my opinion. So I was like interested, and then we got to kind of know each other. And then that night was sort of like, in my opinion, I think it was like, okay, we're friends now. After this sort of like little interesting experience, and I don't know, maybe we even hung out like once before that. But after that, it was sort of like, this was like sort of
the decisive moment.
Yeah, like sort of everything came together where. I was like, okay, we're going to be friends.
Yeah, so we go to this bar, and then we're having a drink. I think there was another guy. I forgot his name. He did pretty good, I think. But I remember we were having this conversation about like mushrooms and stuff, and he was like talking about how...
Was it Ben?
I don't remember.
It was Ben.
Yeah, he was like saying how they are so helpful and all of that. And I was just kind of like... I could be stubborn with certain opinions, opinionated, and sometimes I have a very strong opinion. And I'm like, this is the way it is. And then later I'm like, you know what? Actually, I don't really believe that. I didn't really know that much. So I changed my mind sometimes later. But anyways, he was very opinionated about the mushrooms and stuff. And what stuck to me about you is that you had like, and you still carry yourself like that, it's something that I think is very cool, that you see kind of both sides. You don't, when you form an opinion, I see that you kind of like gather information and you see both sides, usually on conversations. And like you had recently had a little party at your house, and you're like, you know what, I agree with that, but also I can see this too. So it's like, I think that's a very cool trait to have, especially nowadays when everything is like black and white,
Yeah. You can blame my astrological sign on that. I'm like,
what sign are you?
Gemini.
You are?
Yeah, I'm like, not only like is my birth sign Gemini, but like whatever the other extra signs, like the rising, the moon, I'm like 3 times Gemini. So I think it can get kind of annoying when I'm always like playing devil's advocate or like constantly like going like, well, we could also look at it this way. Sometimes it gets annoying, but it is sort of one of those like blessings and a curse, or where it's like a superpower as well, where I definitely like to try to find the other perspective and understand it and see what motivates people, because people don't just do things, they do things because they believe in it, like they don't just do it because of I I don't know, out of anger or spite or anything like that, or that anger is just like, it's not just blank anger. It's there because of a reason, and it's something that they feel is true. They wrote it down in their judgment, and they're feeling very sure about it.
I think that's very, very true, and I mean, the world could use a lot more of that way of thinking, empathy and trying to see the other side. And
yeah, right now I sort of think, because of how polarized everything is and how there's it seems, whether you are or not, people are trying to pull you into the extremes. The extremes are the popular, the extremes are the mainstream in some way. And I'm like, what's radical or punk is actually the middle and compromise, which is pretty kind of boring as far as punk goes. But I feel like if you're trying to find compromise or be in the middle somewhere or have an understanding, that's pretty, feels kind of like there aren't that many people hanging out there. Some people might even believe the middle, but they're not necessarily trying to find compromise or trying to see both sides. They just sort of live there and don't really think about it too much.
Now that you say punk, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but what kind of music you listen to?
I don't listen to punk. I was not I mean, I don't know. I've listened to a lot of music. Mostly, it's been I grew up and was in high school in the early 2000s. So it was right when Napster and all those what are those, music streaming, not streaming, but downloading sites, were super prevalent. So, and it was also when I feel like you weren't always just relying on the radio anymore or charts to tell you what was the new music. There was this whole genre of indie rock essentially that was kind of right below the surface that wouldn't have been heard, but because the internet, the gates were removed, and there was this flood of really great music of the Killers and the Strokes and Modest Mouse. Oh, Modest Mouse was a little bit before that, but the Shins, all these sort of great bands. And definitely that was what me and my friends were into. I was definitely influenced more by my friends who were seeking out new music more than I was, or were better at finding it, more passionate about it. But that sort of bled into me for a little while, and I was always looking for new bands. A lot of the bands I end up liking are either in that indie rock genre, or they don't really fall neatly into a genre. TV on the Radio was a favorite band of mine, and they're kind of a mix between this hip hop and rock and roll. I love right now. One of my favorite bands is Jungle, which is now I feel like they're gonna be super popular this summer.
Okay.
They're kind of disco, a modern disco, I guess. Groove, funk. I like Glass Animals.
I haven't heard of. I'm gonna check them out.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you bring Napster, because I grew up with going to the store in Mexico City, and they would have the CDs that you would press the buttons and listen to in the headphones.
Oh, yeah.
So I love that aspect, and I was huge into rock when I was in Mexico, and then when I moved to the States, I just fell into metal, and metal was my personality. Everything was metal. I would just talk about metal. And it's for example, right now I saw this voiceover actor who she did a part in the new video game called Diablo. And when I was in high school, I played so much Diablo and listened to so much metal and dressed so metal that my nickname became Diablo. So I was known as Diablo in high school.
Oh, you should be Colmillo Diablo.
Colmillo Diablo, yeah. No, I think that, as I said, that was my personality, metal. Everything was metal. And now I don't really listen to metal much. I still listen to it here and there. It just became it sounds a little goofy to me now. And before it was just no, this is this is the best. Everything's metal. You don't like metal? Oh, bye. And no one really listened to metal when the high school that I went to. But then Napster came, and I was like, oh my God. And I was just downloading, finding all these obscure bands and all of that. And So that was fun. In Milwaukee was actually a huge place to listen to metal, like huge scene for metal in that time. And now I'm into hipster music. Well, that's what I call it. That's a genre that I like.
Yeah.
And I love it. Anyways, now that we were talking about the Imagine Life and music, and you said you were trying to find a different acting class, what made you want to be an actor? Was there a decisive moment, or is there something that like you had and you?
So I don't know. When I was a kid, I have these three cousins who live in the Oakland Bay Area, or who did live in the Oakland Bay Area. So we would see each other like maybe a couple times a year, usually once in the summer for about a week, and maybe during Christmas time, maybe one other time during the year. But they were around my age. They were a couple older than me, one younger than me. And when we would hang out, we would have the best time. It was like we would just play make believe. They grew up in a house where they didn't really watch much television or movies or anything like that, but they would play and they would create things and invent things, and I loved that energy when they brought it. So eventually we would start putting on these little plays in our backyard when like my aunt and oldest cousin went to Venezuela when we were young, and when they came back we had written this play about a rich girl and a poor girl, and I was like the this like beauty store owner or jewelry or makeup owner of a store, and I would donate the money to the
Oh, cool.
and it was like, I mean, like we were literally 5, 6, and like 8 or something, or 7
so
or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were very young. But those were like the first sort of performances.
Let me interrupt you quick.
Yeah.
When I was a kid and I played with my cousin Monica, and I would always play like she would have her family and I would make my family. And in our play, and I think it's because I grew up broke as fuck. When I was a kid, I was always like, my family's the rich one and you're the poor one. And it's just like, can I be rich someday? And I was like, no, I'm the rich one. I have the big swimming pool.
Right.
I have this is my house and this is huge. And he was always like that. And she would just be like, I want to play the rich. I was like, no, I'm the rich.
In the play that we did, you were like, the rich one ended up being the poor one. She had a story arc. She ended up spending all of her money on her vanity and ended up being poor, and the poor girl ended up like having some money at the end because of like managing her money right.
So you had an arc.
Actually pretty good like moral to the story at the end of the day for being
for
children.
little kids with like arcs and like you're learning a valuable lesson about like money and stuff. That's pretty cool.
And so they'd be like involved in like community theater. I remember seeing them go to like be in The Princess and the Pea, where when we would go visit them, and so that happened a little bit when we would be together. I was in a couple school plays when I was very young, like in I think 3rd grade or something. I was not Robin Hood. It was James and the Giant. No, shoot, I'm completely blanking on what that first play was at school. But anyway, I like this music teacher was putting it on, and like I went and I ended up being the lead, like just by being the example, like stood up, because I think I'd maybe done it a couple times with my cousins. Anyway, it all came around when at some point we were like, I would be going to bed being like, what am I going to be when I grow up? I want to be like so many different things. And when I found out that being an actor was a job, and I was like, so I could either pick one thing and try to do that really well, or like live that life, or I could be an actor and I can explore all the lives, like live as many lives as I can in this one life. And that just sounded like the right answer to me. I was like, why would I pick anything else? And that was probably around 8 or 9 or so.
Also, you were very young when you were thinking about already what to do with your life.
Yeah, I mean, it just sort of like came, like, I think I also experienced so much joy around performing and acting, and eventually those plays that we would, like the little plays we were doing in the backyard, we started doing musicals every summer. We did
so you're
4 like annual musicals where we started with The Music Man, We did Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Oh no, that was third. Second was Bye Bye Birdie.
Wow, look at you. That's awesome.
Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and then the last one we did was Into the Woods. And we'd all
Wow.
play like multiple parts. We'd all have costumes.
Wow,
We'd memorize
like
the
full
script.
productions.
We'd do dances. We would have props. We'd have like all of our family come to the backyard. By the last one, there was over 40
What?
people at our and in the backyard watching us do Into the Woods. So we had
Wow.
like tickets, and we would all like, when you're like a kid. I mean, I think the last one I did was probably around 11 or 12. Was like, and then we kind of stopped doing those every summer.
That's amazing.
But it was amazing. I look back and I'm like, man, how did we like memorize and do all the like choreography and create everything? But it was like we just lived and breathed it for a week, except for one day when we would like our families would go to Disneyland, and that was like our off day. But other than that, it was like maybe they would send the music ahead of time, like they would send a tape of the music, and we would just listen to the music over and over and over again, and so we'd have the songs memorized. And then in the winter, we'd put on like little like winter pageants where it was just like songs, like Christmas songs.
Wow.
But it was pretty intense, and I loved every minute of that. And when I went to high school, that was when I finally took like an acting class. And my high school's like advanced. It was like called ATA, Advanced Theater Arts.
Oh,
That was the level you could be in once you were a sophomore or older. And our teacher Jan Laurie, she would have us like be in charge of the same thing, the publicity, the set, the costumes. So it was very student run. And so it had a very similar feel to the like what I was doing as a kid with my cousins in the backyard. And I think that has really not only did it like continue my passion, because I still found the love of it, the like community and the and just like the joy and the like spirit of pretend and what it did for the group of people and what it did to me when I was on stage and everything. But also like I've realized all those years of doing that now has played an effect on how I pursue my career now, because as a producer, I've produced a couple of little things, my own short film, a couple other short films, and a couple of like things I've shot for myself. And I do have like a knack for production or for producing, and that's because I think producing these plays in the backyard with my cousins. So I really owe a lot to that.
All those things like set you up, like all those little.
Just knowing how to like think about all the little pieces that you need to put the whole together. It's not just showing up and acting. It's you have the camera crew, you have costumes, you have to get together a team ahead of time, pre-production. I so believe that you have to like spend the time and energy to do that really well and have a good idea of what exactly you want, so that way that when you show up on set, there's less to answer, less questions.
You've done the work before.
Yeah.
Very interesting. When you were figuring all these things out with your plays, I was like literally watching like 7 hours of TV a day and playing soldiers. That was my childhood.
Yeah.
Lots of play outside, but lots of TV. Like lots of TV. And all the TV shows that I watched were like American. They were dubbed in Spanish. So it's kind of funny when I moved to the States. I was a teenager, and then I saw and heard what Homer Simpson sounded like. And I was like, what? And I would watch Home Improvement, and I was like, that's how Tim Allen sounds. I was like it was like such a trip. But now that you say the production and different hats as an actor, acting, I think it's a really tough. For me, it's a roller coaster. It's mainly rejection, but it's a lot of self-discovery, a lot of figuring out the mental state. I think for me, it's a lot of like, how do I maintain a very good, balanced, healthy mindset while pursuing this? Because it's just hard, and it's just like, I think I don't know. I can speak for you, but I think a lot of people who come to LA thinking that acting is just going to be like a 2 or 3 year thing is just not for anybody. So I kind of came to LA not expecting to be in like 2 or 3 years, but for things to move a little faster. And then the pandemic happened, and then now the strike and all of that. So I think doing things, it's like, for me, it's a must. There are actors who will just wait for the right audition, but I've always seen you hands on, and I think that's something that we have in common. Whether it doesn't mean that we're constantly shooting short films, but we've tried it. You've tried it, and I've seen your short films, and the one where it's in the bus stop, it's really good. It's really good.
Thank you.
The acting's good. It's fun. It's very well, like, it looks very professional. And I'm sure you discover a lot about yourself, about what you can do trying that stuff,
Yeah. I mean, for me, one of the ways that I realized helps me stay sane while in pursuit, while I allow, because acting, like you said, is not going to, for most people, is not going to be a 2 to 3 year thing, and then
if ever
finding success. I mean, I think it does happen for some people, but those people eventually have a lull that they're in their career, and they're going to have to find a way to last through the lull. And yeah, so for me, I realized that for there to allow enough time for the career to germinate and to develop, that I would have to keep sane and not have to always be reliant and so desperate for each audition.
100%.
And how I feel about the career based on every audition was to keep another project going and have something on the side that I could work on, where when if an audition came up, okay, great. I'll put the project to the side, work on the audition, focus on that, do my best work, send it in, and then I can let it go, because if that happens, great. But if not, I'm still doing this thing over here, and I'm making this thing happen. And usually that thing was something to help further my own career, whether it was the short film, or just shooting stuff for my reel, or whether it's taking vocal sort of classes to kind of just work out your voice and correct any sort of I had to learn the American Standard Dialect, and or practice accents. So just having something you want to focus on, and don't focus on so many things at once, or at least for me, I can spread myself too thin. So I just pick 1 or 2 things where I'm this is what I'm working on. This is what the next 6 months to a year are going to be focused on. And then once I start to accomplish that or feel comfortable with that, all right, now it's time to move on to the next thing. So sometimes you're right, it's producing and shooting stuff, and sometimes it's taking horseback riding lessons.
That's great. And that's something that you've done that I think has helped you tremendously, and you put in the work when it comes to not just learning the craft, but because acting is not just being a good actor. You have to do all this homework. It's a business. You have to do research of where you're going to fit with these shows that are being filmed. So, for example, white guys right now, and you've heard, people keep telling you, oh, it's hard because they're white, but you're like, I'm not taking that for an answer. We're in categories, right? So, for example, for me, I came here with long hair, a beard, and I was not really auditioning at all. And I saw the shows that most Mexicans were being cast as, the cartel guy, the drug lord, all of that stuff, which it's kind of sad, but I also love those shows. I love Breaking Bad. I love Narcos. I love Ozark. I like those worlds, So what I did is that I shaved my head and I got shots to look and match those. And then everything started changing for me audition wise. And that's something that you did with the Russian. You started taking Russian accent classes. Is that something you wanted to talk about, or?
If
Yeah.
you want to talk about it.
Yeah. So you start taking Russian classes and you got really good at it. But you also have tell us about the Dimitri character that you did.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, the Russian accent was already kind of there. It was like pre-installed. It's just in my blood. Um, I don't know how I picked it up because my grandparents, while they speak Russian, and I've been around Russian speakers growing up. My parents speak English, and I never spoke Russian at home. But I think just the sounds were like, because their accent isn't quite your typical Russian accent. Their accent, they grew up in Persia, and so their accent is a little bit, maybe not your typical Russian accent. But I was able to like hear enough of it, I think, that I just had this like natural Russian accent. And I did go when I went to the vocal classes and was practicing my American Standard dialect. I was checking with her about my Russian accent, and she was actually like, it's already like really good.
Wow.
And it's not that it's like necessarily specific to any like part of like specific region to Russia, which I think would be kind of cool to start to learn to like how to adjust it to fit certain places. But what she said was it's a good Russian accent because it can be understood on television, where like it's not too distracting or too heavy or too strange, and it feels still natural, but we can, as Americans or English speakers, hear it and understand it and get the story. But yeah, so Dimitri Trump was was one of these projects that I wanted to I wanted to have a project going, and I just didn't have anything. And I was like, okay, well, like, what's something I could do on my own by myself, and I don't have to rely on anybody. I don't have to like because that's the thing about shooting something is you have to have a production, you have to have all the cameras, you have to have the sound, you have to have all the stuff.
And rely on people who a lot of times they're like, oh, people are busy and things come out and now you have to rearrange everything for everyone to
and
go
everybody's
to.
and like usually when are starting out, especially, you're doing it all on favor. You're just asking somebody to come do this thing because hopefully they like it. But it's a big ask. So I actually met with this actor, and he was the one that was like told me I kind of seemed like, we both said I could be like a young Rockefeller, and then I think he said something about being like a Donald Trump's like bastard son. And I was like, oh, that's funny. That's like, he's like, yeah, you should do something with that. And I kept thinking about it. I was like, oh, well, like, what if I was being kept in Russia? And like, this is during the time when there was the whole thing about like him having like the like Russian documents that were like supposed to be like real, but maybe they weren't real. I don't know. But it was like everybody. Yeah. So I just was like, I made up a story where I came to the United States. I escaped Vladimir Putin's like grasp or like watchful eye.
It's funny. That's
and
funny.
I was over here trying to be trying to meet my papa. And I was definitely walking this line, sort of like both. It was a satire, definitely. But I was never like, this character is not necessarily anti Donald Trump, but he's kind of loving or like just looking for his father's love, even though like we all know that the shot of him getting that is probably very little. And he also sort of starts to realize like, oh, Donald Trump, like Papa only respects people who have big social medias, like, because that's what he is like on Twitter all the time.
I remember that.
And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll try to grow a big social media as Dimitri Trump.
That's funny.
And it was really a lot of fun. It was fun to also sort of explore social media in the way of this character was also sort of discovering how to use it. So like the first couple times he's recording, he's like not really sure what he's doing.
And it's great because they're using what you have available. And with the trend, for example, I did this video of Donald Trump, and I just literally put my voice over him, and I called the video Donald Trump with a Mexican accent. And the sound is not that good. I didn't do a stereotypical accent. I wasn't like, what up, Holmes? Like what people do a lot, or the very stereotypical like cholo type of accent. That's where they lean towards when they do comedy. A lot of it, or the Mister. I didn't do that. I just did my voice, and I was like, I don't know if it sounds like what people think of a Mexican accent, but it got like 14,000 views.
Yeah.
And then after that, I did a couple voiceovers with Mexican accent to see if we just pick up, but it didn't. And it's one of those things that I try something and I'm like, and next. What I wanted to ask you is about, we're talking about the accent and all of that. So that led you to your roles, NCIS and SWAT, right?
Yeah. I think one of the benefits that I got without even knowing I was getting it with the Dmitry Trump project was, one, I was practicing the Russian accent on a weekly basis. I was trying to shoot like 3 a week. So I got practice with the accent, but I also got practice just being in front of the camera and, working with the camera, like knowing how to use it for its own like comedic ability or use it to help tell the story, how to like frame myself in the camera, where to look when I was like wanting to give a certain effect. Just general comfortability, and I think that those things helped me in self-tapes going forward, just having had the practice. And yeah, I think I obviously look like I'm Russian. I have the accent down, so it's definitely one of my ins as far as something that I will be seen for, that kind of narrows the field of competition a little bit and helps give you some opportunities. I booked the SWAT and NCIS, and once you start to have those on your resume, then that opens other opportunities. And so it's just sort of building one step at a time. And people don't like to pigeonhole themselves. My manager is very much like, why are you worrying about pigeonholing yourself? Like, worry about getting a job first. Like, pigeonhole yourself and then worry about getting out of the pigeonhole.
Have that problem first,
yes,
and then
exactly,
deal with it.
Exactly. Have the problem first. He always says, like, don't put the cart in front of the horse. So,
which now you're riding, right? Doing some horseback riding.
Yeah.
and I was just looking at your videos this morning, and you definitely, like, with the cowboy hat, the horse I showed Emily, and I was like, he looks like a cowboy. Like, you could be a cowboy.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what casting also thinks. So, they were the ones, I started going out for all these cowboy roles, and I was like, I've always wanted to learn how to ride a horse, so this seems like a good excuse to go just learn and pick it up.
Very smart animals. Very smart.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Some people think that they're very dumb animals,
really?
But because they're this big animal that lets us little humans boss them around. But they're very sweet animals, and they all have their own personality, and they, they are a little like they all have like their little quirks and temperaments. And the horse I ride, Willie, he's a little bit of a grouch. Especially when you're like grooming him, you're like, what am I doing? I'm just brushing you, and he doesn't like it. But then when you get on him and you start riding him, he's a happy guy and very responsive and doesn't get spooked or anything. He loves to go fast. So I just have to like make sure either I want to go fast or like I have to make sure I check him. But
my
dad,
when he grew up in Mexico City, he would go to the groceries on a horse in Mexico City in that time. So he would carry groceries and go to the store riding the horse. So when I grew up, there were horses around my grandpa's house, and I got to ride a few times. And one time I remember we went to these mountains on the outskirts of Mexico City, and there were horses there. And in the morning I just went and started riding one, and I was like galloping, and it was fun. Now I'm afraid of them, but I also had a back surgery. So even we were talking about biking, I don't really bike that much, if ever anymore, because my bike, I'm just like,
yeah. And when you go through something that's like so difficult and so, in its own way, traumatizing,
it sucked, and it was pain.
You never want to go back there, right?
I don't want to risk it.
I totally understand. Honestly, when it just makes me really appreciate what athletes do, or some of these people who have sort of like difficult injuries, and then they
Oh, yeah.
fight their way back to doing the thing and at the highest level all over again, even though like they're at risk of potentially doing the same thing again. It's, I mean, talk about like a hurdle in a mental hurdle to have to get over.
It's very mental.
I totally understand.
You need those two elements of, to be an athlete, you need talent, and then you need successful talent. Athlete, you need talent, and you need the drive
and discipline.
I had abilities for, I was very athletic. I was in a track team in Mexico City, and the coach told me that if I apply myself, he's like, you have the ability to even reach Olympic status if you push yourself. But I was like, I'll just go drink with my friends instead as a teenager,
Yeah.
And then I came to the States and I started playing soccer, and then like I remember like I shaved my head, in senior year, and I was like playing soccer. I was like doing a lot of push-ups, and they would be like, Juan, warm up, like start warming up. And then I remember like my friends, they were like, the other teammates, they see you, they get a little intimidated, and then I would like come into the field, and then a ball would be coming this way, and I would just dodge it, and I was like, oh. Like what? So I didn't have that. I mean, and I could be good at it. I was good at it, and I think when you're athletic, it's easier to do other things. Like you can play soccer, you can play basketball. Like I have good aim. Like even with like guns, I was actually pretty good. But I just never had the drive. Like it's just some discipline.
And passion. Mm-hmm. I think there are athletes who don't have the passion, and they're the ones who struggle with the mental health side of having to dedicate your whole life to this thing that you're not even necessarily in love with. It's hard, but yet you're making so much money, or at a certain level you get all this, like you're getting all these doors opened up to you, and it's hard to quit that when, even though you don't love it. So I mean, like, not that, I guess maybe passion isn't necessary, but it really helps, because otherwise, like, most people, if they don't have any passion for it, or I guess some people can lose the passion for it too if they get overworked. But
we're watching this show called Alone, and it's
I love that show. Yeah.
And it's like, it's the mind, it's very mental. And when we watch like YouTube, like Michelle Carr, she has a YouTube channel where she's like challenge accepted. She does like police training, she does lifeguard training, she just did a boxing match. We haven't finished watching the video, but it's like the mind is just like very, you need that mind element. Now, you are originally from California, right? You're in LA. You don't meet a lot of people who are like, I grew up here,
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, if acting, was going to be, for whatever reason, not the option, what do you think you would be pursuing?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, this sort of thing sort of changes, I feel like. I think...
You see, you haven't even think too much about that, because so that you're very going for it, right?
Totally. I mean, all of my skill at this point, and my... I'm best suited for storytelling. Would I'd love to direct. I'd love to do something else, like on top of acting. But I mean, I've spent so much of my energy and effort and time focused on it that it's definitely what I'm best at. Like being involved in storytelling in some format is, I think, likely what ends up being my lifelong career.
Okay.
That said, like, when I have those other moments of like, well, what would I do if I were to like let go of this? In those moments, because I think everybody has those. I don't think it's like, I don't know, some people,
like every week.
Yeah, I mean, like, but some people feel like, I've come across actors where they're like, if you even think about it, you should just quit. And I'm like, no, that's silly. If we're all being real, we all have moments of like, like, what if I didn't do this anymore?
And not just acting, my life be? Every job.
Sure, every job. Yeah. I think, I mean, right now I would probably have to go back to school for some of it, but I would love to like work in some sort of environmental field. I I don't know that I mean, like, again, I don't know enough about that to even be like, I would want to do this part of it because, I mean, I think some sort of sustainability would be great, or, you know, maybe even like design for like landscapes, like so that people, especially here in California, as we get less and less water.
Not this year.
Not this year. But like over time, people are gonna have to start ripping up their lawns and finding new ways to have a beautiful like garden or beautiful plants or setup around their home. In fact, the we rent a duplex and our landlady has a very thought out garden. I mean, we have gravel in the front, so no lawn, and she has her spots where she has her garden, but like it's very sustainable in my opinion. I think, doesn't require the amount of water that lawn takes. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where I do have a passion for the environment. I love nature. I just got back from a camping trip in Yosemite, which is like it's my favorite place in the world. So I love it. It's a very powerful place for me. Every time I go, I learn something new about myself, or I sort of recenter and rediscover like, oh, this is where I've changed. This is where I've grown. Even just knowing that like I need that in my life. I need to get out into nature. I need to go on hikes.
And that's something that I've noticed, that you balance your life, and I wanted to talk to you about, because I've in the creative industry, I think it's difficult, and that's why I was telling you that it's important to have a way of balancing life, because it's a lot of reaction. But every time I talk to you, you are very positive, and I have actor friends or friends who are very negative, So it's just, I think it's important to balance your life, and I wanted to hear more of how you do that, balance that and keep that positive attitude, because it takes work to also have that.
Yeah. I admittedly, in college in particular, like I wasn't part of like the theater group. Like I didn't necessarily fit in with I don't know, if you want to call them theater geeks, you can call them theater geeks. I don't consider that like a negative term. I just consider that sort of like these people who are really passionate about musical theater and they sing the song. And I love those people. Like they're my people. But I wasn't like tight with that group so much. I'm still friends with a lot of people I went to theater school with. But I hung out with people who were in the honors program, and I hung out with people who were in the film program, and part of like why I want to be an actor is to live all these different lives, right? And one of those like I don't want to just live the actor life, because that is there is a type, that is just the actor life. And while that is my like main passion, and it is my what I want to focus on in my career, I feel like I can bring more value to that career and that industry and to my roles if I'm living a life outside of that
and enjoying life
and like we were talking about those athletes that burn out. There's so many kids who like play the same sport now since they're like 5 years old through 18 years old, and then by the time they're actually good enough to be going to college and playing in college or going pro, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I hate it, because that's all they've done. And to me, like, I don't want that to ever happen. I love acting, so I protect it, and I protect it by also making sure that like I have these other hobbies. Like I love rock climbing, and I love this horseback riding thing I do. I like having friends over just to hang out. I don't like necessarily talking about what we do for careers. It's not something I really like. I'd rather discuss like interesting ideas.
And you had that little celebration at your house that was really nice. And I wanted to ask you, this is very off subject with motivation, but I noticed that your house was very, and the reason I noticed this is because my wife is very creative. She loves taking care of the space, and she like arranges things. And I noticed that your house was very like organized. And I noticed that because I come from a house where my wife's constantly seeing things. And I wanted to ask you, is it you or is it your girlfriend who is like into like I noticed like the spices or beans or whatever. They were in a jar with like a light, and I was like, that's very curated. And the bathroom is very curated, and they in the yard. I was telling you, this. I mean, for those no one can see, but the house had this patio with like a barn and the lights and the table set up with like the warmer for the meat and pasta. I felt like I was in a TV show when I was sitting there. I was like, this is like the end, of like the Rookie when they're like hanging out by a taco truck with like very nice lighting. It felt like that to me.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
or is it both of you?
First, the garden itself, like the plants and everything else, is all our landlady Lucy. I mean, she cares so much about her home, and has kept it. And I mean, it's 100-year-old home, but she makes sure things are done right. And so the yard and everything that was like the way that the landscape is 100% her. Lizzie also deserves the majority of the credit as far as like organizing and everything, because she appreciates things having a proper home, things not being left out, no clutter. I can sometimes, left to my own devices, I can overlook clutter a lot of the time. To me, like I know where things are, even if they are a little bit cluttered. And I've had to learn to tidy up a little bit. Not that I was like messy. I was never a messy person. I was never like somebody who left clothes on the floor or anything like that. So I also have a tidiness about me. So I think both of us together. That said, like the lighting is a lot of my, like, I mean, she was involved in one light in like our little like office space, that she had imagined that. But like the lighting with the spices and the jars, that was like, I wanted this specific like smart light that changes colors, that dims. I'm very much about like making sure the light, we have warm light. I hate the like fluorescent lights.
Oh, you should see the houses in Mexico. Like in Mexico, when people don't care about lighting, or at least my experience was like the lighting would be like a cable coming out from the ceiling with a hanging light bulb that it had like fluorescent light, like, and it was just like all the houses are like, and I'm like, I need sunglasses inside these houses.
Yeah, and you know what's even worse than that is when there's like a chandelier of some kind with multiple light bulbs, and then there's some that are warm and some that are fluorescent. Like there's like matched, like colors of light. Like that will drive me insane. And the thing is, I think people don't know how that's affecting them on a day-to-day. Like just the ability to relax in my eyes are really sensitive to light. When there's too much light, I always wear sunglasses and everything else. So we always have very dim, like warm light when we're at home, especially in the evenings. So that side is like, or the lights outside, the bistro lights or whatever they're called, the hanging lights. I set that up, and I was making sure, like, I wanted to make sure it looked really good. I wanted to make sure it
makes a big difference in how you live.
Yeah.
I would never switch the bag of beans into a container of beans that says beans,
So Lizzie worked in catering.
Okay.
Before she, like, her job now, she works for a fragrance company. But before that, she worked in catering. So that's where the like things over ice or things like over heat and the like organization of the food out. That was that all also deserves to go to Lizzie.
Yeah, Emily will get the oatmeal from the oatmeal container into the glass that says oatmeal. I would just never do that. I am not a dirty person, but I'm not an organized person. Like this goes here. Like these are my pile of SD cards. This is my pile of notebooks. Like it's my piles. I kind of know where things are, and Emily like organizes and saves everything. If it was up to me, it would be like a maze here. It would be like, okay, how do I get out of here?
I mean, so like I mean, one of the things. Like the reason we have like spices in the jar or like rice and stuff, or spices on like the magnet on the side of the refrigerator and like the grains and everything in the jars is partly just because of.
You can come in. We're almost done. It's okay.
I forgot.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Well,
Yeah,
we're
no worries.
talking
Come
about-
on in. Come on
We're
in.
talking about your organizational.
We're talking about
skills and like
We're
Liz is,
talking about our partners. But what that was also partly like done out of necessity, just because we don't have a ton of space to like keep everything or counter space. So, we got these jars. That was also Lizzie's idea, but I had already had a couple like magnet spice things at my old place, so that kind of just grew into that idea. And it was a way to sort of both use it's functional storage, but it also done in a way that looks really nice.
It's
and
pleasant
sort
because
of
you live in lot
adds
space,
to
yeah.
and it adds to the ambiance to be able to like see your food and see your the rice and like, oh yeah, I'm gonna use the rice today, or oh yeah, we have like popcorn kernels, let's make some popcorn, or like see all your spices visually out magnetized to the side of your fridge. Allows you to be like, oh, what do I want to use to like spice up this meal, and it becomes functional because it saves space but it also looks really beautiful. I mean, spices are like gorgeous, and grains, when you see them sort of clustered together,
I agree.
there's it's an old school kind of, I think, beauty.
Simple.
That sort of, and also
organic.
sort of feels kind of grounded to me.
Yeah, when I met Emily, I would be the type of person who's like, I want milk. I'll just drink it out of the jug because why get the glass out? She's like, ew.
I mean, I would also agree with Emily. That's ew. I wouldn't do that.
I don't drink out of the jug anymore. But that was, many years back.
Yeah, bachelor years, right?
Anyways, Joshua, I just wanted to wrapping up by thanking you for coming up into Colmillo Chilango. And I do want to ask you, because, we're in the film industry and you've done a lot of homework, and I'm thinking about the people who are not in LA, who might be thinking about starting an acting career, on or whatever stage in their life. And I think about this because I think there's a fascination to moving to LA to pursue something like this. And I want to close up by asking you, what would you say to someone who is not living in LA, who's thinking about maybe coming here and trying it out? What would you say to that person?
I would say, I mean, it depends on where they live, partly. Because for a lot of people, I would say start where you are. Like, everything's self-taped now. So you can send videos to wherever in the country. A lot of the times when you're starting out, you have a market that's nearby now, because not everything's done just in New York and Los Angeles. You have things done in Atlanta. You have things done in the Southwest. You have things done in near New Orleans. You have things done in like Toronto and Vancouver. Albuquerque in New Mexico. All these places are going to hire like their smaller roles from people who live nearby, that they can they don't have to pay to travel to those spots. So get started there is what I would say first. Just at least, start seeing if it's right for you. And then there will become a time after you've been pursuing it for a while and you've started to, whether you book a couple small things, or you just know that this is just the right, like you are just so in love with it and you've been pursuing it and you've done some casting director workshops, which are also now online, and you've developed some relationships with them. Do all that groundwork where you are from, where you have the support of your family and your friends, because you come here and LA is notoriously difficult to make friends. I think
it just takes time.
It takes time, and it's hard to find your people. There's so many different types of people out here, and a lot of times they already have their people, that they're not necessarily looking for a new friend. I don't know, everybody says that they are, but people aren't necessarily like, the friendships are kind of different in that they're not as organic as, like, sometimes they come from either work or from just like, I don't want to badmouth LA too much because I love it here and I love the people here, but I do know that it's notoriously difficult for making friendships.
It is.
And so one thing I've been blessed with is being from here. I have my friends. I have my family. They're only an hour away drive. Some of them live in LA, so I get to see them. And to have that has helped me sustain. If you come out here too early and you don't have you don't have any sort of thing set up for you here, you're just coming out blind, it's going to be harder to sustain over the long period of time that you might need to build your career.
Yeah.
I've said that, and I said that to somebody on set who had just moved here and they were booking their first job. They were from New Orleans.
Okay.
And within a month they booked a major like movie, and they've only been on major movies and major TV shows ever since. So for him, he was fine. He ended up being okay and ended up not needing the long-term advice. But most people are going to need some sort of way to support themselves, have some sort of support system, and have developed their career enough to make it worthwhile to stay out here. Because the first 6 months, first year, honeymoon period. It's beautiful weather. Everything's new. So much to explore. People, you have like fast friends that you kind of become friends with, but then later they start to flake out or become less reliant, or maybe they weren't as good of friends as you hope. And then year 2, I've noticed, a lot of people get a little homesick.
Oh yeah.
They start to,
a lot of people
they see the other side of LA where it gets a little bit hard, and the city doesn't love them as much as they thought it might.
It's a rough place, and I met a lot of people who come and 2 years are out. Home,
I mean, like, I don't really know if this is an accurate thing, but I used to think like 2 years. If I asked somebody like, how long have you been here? If they said under 2 years, I was like, okay, but like they may not make it.
Yeah.
They may not, like, if you've been here for over 2 years and you decide to leave, that's your choice. But it wasn't that the city sort of was too much.
Weirded you out.
But so yeah, my advice would be, depending on where you are, if you're close to one of those markets, start there. Like, book a couple co-stars there, because those co-stars on your resume, or those like things that you can book in your hometown or near your hometown, are going to be so valuable on your resume to come out here, to have already had like that experience and to know what that's like, and do your workshops, do casting director workshops, and start developing where you're at. Save up your money.
The money part for sure,
Yeah.
because it's so expensive here.
Yeah, and you got to have enough time to like land on your feet, get out here, and maybe not have a job for a little bit. And if you can save up some money and then come out here and then pursue it out here, if you can end up with representation where you're from and then find representation here before you move out here, like even better.
Amazing.
Even better. But I understand some people just need to get like away from their hometown, or maybe it's not close to one of these areas. Like if you live in I don't know, if you live in like Kansas, there's not really any like local things like that are like film stuff that are shooting near you. But even then, I would still like say start with some workshops, save up some money. Don't just jump the gun. Do your research. Plan a little bit. Listen to some acting podcasts like this one or other ones.
Audrey Helps Actors is great to check out.
Yeah, Audrey Helps Actors, One Broke Actress. There's a lot out there for how to develop your career, and do that homework first, because when we both started, those podcasts didn't exist, and there weren't those resources that were like kind of giving you guidance and
you
tools.
can learn
and
so much through those podcasts.
So if you can do that first, you're gonna save yourself so much grief and so much struggle.
Such pain.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, everybody's gonna have their pains anyway. Like, you're gonna have pains regardless, but you're gonna just save yourself a little bit of struggle, and you will have a better chance of creating a long-term career.
Great advice.
Yeah, it was long-winded.
Well, no, I mean, but anyways, I just want to thank you for coming once again. Maybe you can come over in the future. So thank you so much for watching another episode, the first one in English from Colmillo Chilango. Make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Colmillo Chilango.